Europa Universalis 4 is a renowned Paradox interactive game, known for its very interesting world simulations from 1444 to 1821. But a question I ask myself as the game gets further and further into its development cycle is, what do I want from the next installation of the Europa Universalis series? What do I expect from Europa Universalis 5? While this list will be imperfect, it will go through my personal thoughts on what I feel like the game can change. Even though some of this may be a little difficult to implement, I'm just going on what I think should be best. One thing I think could get a refresh in Europa Universalis 5 is warfare, specifically related to how the claim system works and how larger wars and late game wars are implemented. EU4 here could focus more directly on how, during the period of 1444 through 1821, or the late Middle Ages to the early modern period, claims and royal marriages were still very crucial to the evolution of territorial expansion in the case of nations like Austria, Spain, France, Great Britain, among many others. Europa Universalis 5 in this sense can make it harder to conquer land or make more restrictions on land. Similarly, Europa Universalis 5 could add in many new features such as more unit types, more advanced unit types, more interactive war systems, and a complete rework of the current role-based die system. EU5 could also modify how supply works, adding in different unit types similar to games like Imperator or Hearts of Iron 4, or introducing a system almost similar to VIC3, where you can put specific amounts of units on borders. While I do appreciate current micro, I think the AI could do with a better system of microing its nation to make it more interesting for players during PvE, specifically in the case of warfare, obviously. While coalitions and league wars could be more expanded, especially due to how historically they're heavily present in European wars in the case of coalitions against the Ottomans, France, and the various Italian wars. EU4 here could expand from one league war to various different leagues of wars and make it significantly more interesting for the player to interact with them. A second feature I'd be looking forward to is a reworking of interactions between the AI and the player, specifically in the case of rivals. The rival system in EU4 is very one-dimensional, giving you a minor power protection increase and allowing you to declare a contained rival casus belli. However, historically, rivals were a big part of world interactions. And what the EU5 team could do is make rivals a significantly more mainstay part of the game. Whether that be only allowing you to declare wars in which your rival is in, or just changing around how the rival features work to whatever they feel like is most comfortable to make the player more focused on curtailing the rival instead of just expanding randomly. Another feature I feel that is partially lacking in EU4, which can be expanded on in EU5, is populations and religious minorities. Well, I don't wish that EU4 is a pop system similar to VIC3, as what makes EU4 unique is that it's an external-facing, state-run game instead of an internal-facing, leader-run game, like in the case of CK3 or VIC3. However, I feel like it still leaves out a lot of features of differences in populations and religions in areas, especially in the case of Europe, where many different groups intermix, or where there's a lot of Jews, for example, are missing from the map. I myself am Jewish and wish that there are more Jews in the Poland area, because in reality there are 20 or 30% of the population there, but they're just unrepresented, just shown as Orthodox or Catholic. This may be hard to manage, but would mean maybe there would be at least some internal interactions with the player would have to choose how to manage all their different populations and make it more impactful when you don't have a cohesive population. Piggybacking off this, the EU5 dev team could expand greater into estates and how they operate within your country. While it's not always great to go into these internal mechanics, it could definitely make it more interesting, making the estate mechanics more important and greater aspect of your Europa Universalis experience when playing the game. Maybe impacting who controls the throne or some internal politics without going as in depth as a game like Victoria 3 does. One of my most important changes, which I think could be really great for EU5, is a major update to the economic system. While I don't want something as in depth or personally as boring as VIC3, I would still want a greater growth of the system from simple deving and building buildings to something more interactive for the player. This would also involve a changing in how the trade system works, maybe making it more dynamic or not solely based on Venice and the English Channel. This would encourage a player to play more dynamically throughout the world and allow gameplay to be more interesting than the simple mercantilist trade nations that usually pop up when you want to get rich. I'm not sure exactly how EU5 would implement this, but I sure hope that they allow for flowing and changing trade goods and a more dynamic system. Maybe some people disagree with this, but the final thing I will suggest in this video for EU5 is more historicity in the release of the game, and maybe a historical or non-historical mode, similar to euiv. I think this would provide players who are interested in playing an historical simulation of the world greater accuracy, where nations would follow the paths they historically followed during the game. Meaning you would always have the rise of Russia, heavy colonialization in Asia, the decrease of Chinese power, alongside historical Protestant evolution, different borders in Europe being pretty accurate, for example, Austria inheriting Spain, etc., etc. Of course, later on, a lot of these scenarios would break, but it would make it very interesting for a player looking for a more historical game. While this may be hard, some railroading could honestly be quite interesting, ensuring that nations, if you want to play a historical route, will always get their historical paths, instead of just leaving it up to a 50-50 chance in EU4. Though this mode could lead to some Iron Man exploits. Overall, I think EU4 is a great game, which could do for some large changes in EU5 to make it from one of the best games I've ever played to a 10 out of 10 masterpiece of all time. It may be hard, and my suggestions obviously aren't perfect, and I don't know perfectly how to implement them, but I can imagine they could just make the game even better. Sincerely, Wonder Productions.